Hello, welcome back. Happy New Year. It feels like it has been forever. I find myself kind of nervous and I have no idea why. I think actually it is because this is the start of a series that I'm really excited for. This is the first in the Paper Lab series, which is where I'm going to compare different papers. I'm going to start with my controls. So this is the Tomoe River Paper episode, which is kind of the standard for fountain pen paper. But I will also be setting up a copy paper. So I've got a sheet of copy paper that I've cut in half, and I will be setting up a similar thing on this just to have like a bottom of the barrel baseline. So this is just regular. It's like 75 GSM run of the mill copy paper, and then I have some 68 GSM original Tomoe River paper. We'll get to that. We'll get to the writing on it in a second. First, I want to talk about what we will be stepping through. So I spent a lot of time picking inks for this, and they're all in this wonderful little pouch that my mom made for me. So there are in here 6 bottles of ink. I have essentially 7 pens ready to go. One of them is a what is this? Pilot Varsity, so it doesn't need a bottle. There will probably be an addition to this at some point. One of the scented inks from this year's Inkvent, I think, will be joining as a feathering sample, which is what the Pilot Varsity is supposed to represent, because it feathers more than anything else it feathers more than most things that I use, but I don't know. I got a new set of varsities and they don't seem to want to feather as much. So we will see how that goes. So what this is going to be is I'm going to be writing on one of these sheets. So you may have noticed that I had 2 roughly A5 size. One of these will be for a writing sample. That will be with the, we're going to call it the feathering ink. And I will add the feathering ink to this page when I get a bottle of it. And what I am calling the bleeder ink. Now, I chose writer's blood because in every single pen that I had put this in, it was so wet. It flowed so much. It bled through to the back of the page. And so I was like, well, I'll put it in a Preppy and that will be my bleeding ink. However, I think Preppies are perhaps a little dry for it. So it probably, we will have to reevaluate this one. Once I write a writing sample, I'll just be transcribing something from a book off to the side. Once I have the writing sample, I will move on to another page where I will have, I'm calling this the default. So in this Lamy, I have loaded Iroshizuku Asagao. And I chose this one as the default because it is like a middle of the road blue. It has minimal sheen, minimal shading. I just wanted to see what a super consistent, solid, flat color would look like, and how it would change on different papers. The shading ink that I chose is going to be in this this Prefonte. It's basically the upscaled Platinum Preppy. It has Diamine Autumn Oak. Autumn Oak. I love the way that this one shades, and so I'm really excited to see how this looks on different papers. It has not just... It has a lot of complexity and depth to it, and so I picked that one as the shader. I also included a sheening ink. I did not pick like a nitrogen. Where's that one? Yeah, there we go. I did not pick a super sheener, a monster sheener. None of the Organic Studio stuff. I picked a middle of the road sheening ink, Pilot Iroshizuku Tsutsuji. I think that the medium nib that I have in this will show the sheen, but we will see. What's next? Shimmer in this Kakuno, because it is the easiest to clean the shimmer out of, is Emeraude de Chavour by Jacques Urban. It will probably not be the one that I use every time. I will probably change what shimmer I use each time, just because I have so many shimmers. Thank you, Inkvent. And the last one, is this the one that I have it in? I think so. Yes. So the last ink category that I have is a dual shader. And this pen is going to drive me crazy because the Lamy is on backwards. But different papers can also affect the dual shading properties. So I have a dual shader to test with. And those are kind of the qualities that I'm going to be focusing on with... I didn't tell you what color that was, did I? This is Sailor Mania Fuji. So in my last What's Inked Up video, I think this is in my TWSBI VAC 700. I really like this ink, so I'm looking forward to having it inked up at all times. So I believe I already introduced the paper. We're going to start with the writing samples. So this is just regular copy paper, and this is Tomoe River Paper. I'm going to start writing, and this will be sped up, and we will talk when I'm done. Oh, I should say that before I get started, today I am going to be transcribing from a treasury of Irish fairy and folktales. I found a fairly short story called The Horned Women by Lady Wilde, and I will probably not make it all the way through, but you know. All right. Okay, voiceover time, because editing me is realizing I did a terrible job explaining why I'm doing this and what exactly it is that I'm doing. So, okay. First, there are really only 2 specifically fountain pen papers that I have ever purchased and not been disappointed by in some way. I've tried some really popular papers too, like Clairefontaine Triomphe, Bank Paper, Cosmo Airlight, and except for Tomoe River Paper and I don't know, Midori Cotton MD, I've either hated the paper or it has had a fatal flaw that's kept me from really enjoying the use of it. And I have had such a hard time finding really systematic explorations of paper on YouTube. I'm sure they're there, I just can't find them. And my experiences don't really seem to line up with the various blog posts I find that discuss paper that way. So I'm going to share my experiences, and maybe there is someone out there who will feel a little bit validated that they also don't like the darling papers of the fountain pen world. Am I using this as an excuse to get more kinds of paper? Maybe. Yeah. I'm also using this to learn more about paper and how it's made. This is going to be the really hard part because a lot of the processes and especially materials are very proprietary. So I'm going to struggle to talk about what papers are coated with, which is going to make this hard, but I shall try. So to do this, I got some inexpensive pens that I won't mind being inked up all the time with the same ink, that have varying stiffnesses. Yep. So they've got varying nib stiffnesses and feels against the paper. I did not include any fine or extra fine pens. They're all mediums, and I have one broad. But I have a more complicated writing experience with finer nibs, and I didn't want to introduce that kind of variability. I wanted to give these papers their best chance. So I explained why I chose the different inks, and really that was the deepest reasoning that went into this. I am doing the writing samples front and back to try and see if I can tell a difference. I won't with the printer paper or Tomoe River paper, but there are some that definitely have felt different to me on the backside. So the second page with the bulk of the ink samples had a little less thought put into it than even that. I will probably pare down in the future and simplify what I'm writing going forward, but I was absolutely delighted that my spur of the moment water test that I had no rational reason to do other than gut feel is actually a legit thing. It's a sort of facsimile of a dot gain test, which is probably a good stand-in for feathering, honestly, or even the ink spread that you can get on some kinds of paper from just writing on it. Now to talk about Tomoe River Paper. This paper has kind of a complicated recent history, and I'm honestly surprised at how much I know about it, though I have done some more research for this video. The most helpful sources for that I found were the blog Fudefan and a Japanese website called peninfo.jp. Incidentally, Fudefan has some really excellent paper comparisons between the different Tomoe River paper versions. So, the paper was originally made by Tomoegawa Paper Company, I think starting in 1981, and it was not actually developed as a fountain pen paper. Because of how thin they could make it, it was marketed and exported for things like printing Bibles. In 1984, they had developed a version that they would sell in notebooks, and there were colored versions of the paper and planners that used the paper, and eventually it was sold loose for letter writing, basically. Now, I've read sources that say that this paper is a regular wood pulp paper with a mix of soft and hardwoods, but Sanzen Paper Manufacturing Company, who has now taken over making this paper, states on the info page that it's modified India paper, which I think historically is made from hemp and cloth, so who knows? It's plant fiber based. There, done. The paper I'm using here is 68 GSM. GSM stands for grams per square meter and indicates what the weight of 1 square meter of the paper would be in grams, shockingly enough. It's often a stand-in for how thick the paper is, though this doesn't always matter as much as other properties. You'll see in a little bit that the 68 GSM Tomoe River Paper has less bleed-through and ghosting than the 75 GSM copy paper, and there's a reason for this. That reason is the coating. Tomoe River Paper is a coated paper, and the copy paper is not. Now, this is the part of paper manufacturing that most perplexes me because I am really fuzzy on what the difference is between coatings and surface sizing for writing papers, which I don't feel equipped to get into a discussion of sizing in this video, but the bottom line for Tomoe River Paper is that the manufacturer covers the paper with essentially a powder that makes the surface of the paper itself a little bit hydrophobic, and probably also has some sort of optical brightener to make the paper whiter. Some paper coatings use clay, but if I were to make a super scientific gut-based guess, I don't think there's any clay on Tomoe River Paper. Probably the main reason that I started this series with Tomoe River is that I use it so much. I write nearly all of my letters to pen pals on this paper, even though it doesn't feel as luxurious as more textured papers like Cosmo Air Light or Midori Cotton. It really does have an incredible balance of showing off the different ink qualities like sheen and shading, and especially the dual chrome shading. The surface of it really is glassy smooth too. This means that the ink can take longer to dry with broader nibs, and for some applications this is kind of a showstopper. I have a Hobonichi planner with Tomoe River Paper, maybe you've seen it, and I have to use an extra fine nib to write in it, or the smearing is kind of a lot. I don't mind a little bit of smearing, but even with the extra fine, it can be more than some people are willing to wait on. But that's really the biggest downside for me personally with this paper. I don't notice any issues with hand oils that can be a problem on other papers, and I actually like a little bit of ghosting, which I think is the second biggest complaint that I usually hear about Tomoe River Paper. I know that Cosmo Air Light, the colors pop more, inks pop, but man, Tomoe River Paper is such a good baseline. I actually see a little bit of shading in this scribble that I have. I see a lot more shading than I remember in Asagao, actually. That's okay. But you can see here in Sailor Manyo Fuji, there is some definite separation in the scribble of the colors. There's also, you can see it particularly around the delineation between the dark parts of the shading and the light parts. You can see this ring of teal around them.
So you can see here with the direct comparisons that in the copy paper you can pretty clearly see the writing on the other side of the page, and in places the ink bleeds through. Surprisingly, this is not super distracting. In comparison, the lighter weight Tomoe River paper has no bleed through, though there is still some ghosting. This ghosting is much more pronounced in the 52 GSM version of this paper, but less so in the 68 GSM that I have here. As for the second page of writing samples, you can really see some of the wonderful qualities of Tomoe River paper. The lines are super crisp. There is almost no spreading of the ink from where the nib puts it down onto the paper. When I was writing on the copy paper, I did not think it spread very much, but in comparison to Tomoe River, I can see that I was wrong. This can be both a good and a bad thing, I think. It just depends on how you like your writing to feel. The writing samples also show how defined shading can be on Tomoe River paper. Autumn oak will apparently shade on anything, but it is really beautifully defined on Tomoe River. I keep talking about Cosmo Air Light, but it's probably the only paper I've used that shows shading to better effect than this paper. Shimmer is shimmer. The particles sit on top of the Tomoe River paper just like they do on the copy paper, but on Tomoe River you can also see the other qualities of shimmer chicken, like sheen and actually a bit of shading too. Neither that ink nor Totsuji showed much sheen at all on the copy paper, which makes sense to me on a more absorbent paper. I think I liked the glow up of Fuji the most, though. It just looks kind of fuzzy and uniformly purple on the copy paper, with the teal only showing up on the dot gain test. But it's beautiful on Tomoe River, which, with actually a more uniform colored blob from the dot gain test than the copy paper had, which is kind of fun. And I was really surprised at how interesting the dot gain test was to me for something that was so spur of the moment. It really showed how effective the coating is at keeping the fibers of the paper from wicking moisture away from where it was deposited, and that was really cool to me.
Tomoe River, I love it. I like it because unlike any other paper that I have enjoyed, like Cosmo Air Light, it is so low maintenance. I take it out and I use it and it's beautiful. Yeah, that's the first Paper Lab series. If you have any suggestions for other things that I should try, things that I should talk about, please let me know in the comments. I will be doing the next one probably in February. I don't know yet if it's going to be a paper I like or one of the popular papers that I cannot stand. I will let you figure out what those might be. Yeah. I hope that everyone has a wonderful week. I will see you next week. Bye. What the hell? 12 horns? Oh.